round 2 then. Okay, now I need to keep that up in there and that open there. Right, let's get started. Hello everybody and welcome to the Retrieval Practice Primary the Retrieval Practice Primary book launch with Kate Jones and Ella Martin and me, Adam, where we're going to be talking about all things retrieval practice in the primary classroom. And the first thing I'm going to try and do is share my screen. No, it should be shared already. Is it shared already? Can you just nod if it's shared? Brilliant. Okay, the little green box thing has gone away. All right, whatever, no big deal. Let's get cracking. Okay, so first let's start with introductions. Hello, I'm Adam. I'm the Education Director at Carousel Learning, which is an outstanding online learning platform aimed at bringing your students greater knowledge through the power of retrieval practice. We've recently launched our Carousel Primary offering, which we'll talk about in due course, but broadly includes things like multiple choice quizzing and also our amazing Carousel Primary question banks, which are literally thousands of questions and answers ready for use across the primary national curriculum. I'm joined by Kate, who's a history teacher and has taught nationally and internationally. Kate's published, like, this is quite unbelievable. Kate's published 7 books. And all of them are really fantastic with John Catt, and recently that includes the Retrieval Practice collection, which is Retrieval Practice 1, 2, and Primary.
And primary, yeah.
And primary, yeah. So Retrieval Practice Primary was only released a couple of days ago, and that's partly what we are kind of celebrating tonight. Kate spent this year working with schools in the UK and internationally, focusing on supporting primary and secondary schools with the implementation of retrieval practice. And in September, Kate will join evidence-based education as senior associate for teaching and learning, which is a really cool job. And obviously we wish her luck with that. Ella is a year 6 primary teacher and Thinking Schools Academy Trust Thinking, Learning and Teaching Hub lead. She's one of Carousel's most important users. She's been instrumental in the launch of Carousel Primary and you know, kind of all the features that we launched. She gave us really amazing feedback, and she's been instrumental in the formation of our Carousel Primary question banks, which I spoke about before, which we prepared for primary schools nationwide. She is also, I'm led to believe, recovering from residential. So I think that probably means something to you guys. Ella, you should be able to like keep yourself awake for the session, right?
Yeah. Just about.
Just about. Brilliant. Okay, lovely. All right. So just as I mentioned, I wanted to really quickly highlight Kate's book, which has just come out. So it's Retrieval Practice in Primary. And here's a quote from one of the reviewers of the book. Oh, Kate's brought a copy. You know what you need to do, Kate? Just hold that up the whole way through, just in case. It's really fantastic. I had a sneak peek at it early on, and it's really like it goes from theory to practice. It covers absolutely everything you could ever need in terms of retrieval practice in the primary classroom. It also has a wonderful case study by none other than Ella Martin, who's there on my screen. I don't know where she is on yours. We'll come to that a bit later on. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to be asking some questions to Kate and Ella about retrieval practice and about how they could use, or how you could use Carousel to support implementing retrieval practice in the primary classroom. And we might hop backwards and forwards between what Carousel looks like and some of the stuff that Kate and Ella are talking about. If at any point you have any questions, just pop them in the chat bar and I will try and get to them as soon as I can. Let's get started with question number 1. So one of the things that I was quite taken by when I read Kate's book is like how like she really cares about retrieval practice. One of the words that stuck out to me was this word marvelous, and that she refers to memory as marvelous. Why is retrieval practice important in the primary classroom, and why do you describe memory as marvelous? Over to you, Kate.
Oh, thanks, Adam. Well, I usually ask people to describe their memory, whether it's teachers or students, and most people are quite negative and critical and say their memory isn't good. And actually that just shows a misunderstanding of memory. And they're usually referring to their working memory, which obviously, as we know, isn't as powerful as long-term memory. So when I say memory's marvelous, I mean really long-term memory. And when I first got interested in retrieval practice, I was looking at it with a focus on my exam classes. So this is a while ago, and perhaps you might have had a similar experience. And I was using retrieval practice to really help my students get better grades in their exams. But the research does say, and Dunlowski said this, and so many other people, about it being a strategy for students of all ages. And then I started embracing it more with Key Stage 3. And I worked in an all-through school in Abu Dhabi. So we had the primary school on campus, and I taught years 5 and 6. And when I started using retrieval practice with younger students, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I'm not telling year 10s and year 12s what retrieval practice is, if they've been doing this for years, if they've been using these effective study strategies and they just become a habit, and it's just something that they're used to, and they know that it helps them make progress. It's really interesting, the fact I have worked with so many schools in different countries, that England, Ofsted, have actually said in 2019 that they want schools to be using retrieval practice, because in Wales, they haven't mentioned that yet, but they will hopefully in the future. Not that we should do it for Ofsted, but I think it's a really good thing that Ofsted have highlighted this, that there's so much research out there that is really positive. And Adam, you'll be familiar, Ella, probably a few other people. Geoffrey Karpicki has done so much research on retrieval practice with his colleagues. And then what he decided to do was, the research that he'd done was with university, college-age students in America, that showed retrieval practice was a really effective strategy when compared to other strategies such as rereading, highlighting, copying notes. The groups that were doing retrieval practice, recalling from memory, ended up doing much better. So then a few years later, what Geoffrey Karpicki, Megan Sumaraki, Janelle Blunt, these researchers wanted to know was, well, actually, what about younger children? Younger students, elementary in America, and they did do research. And I think there's probably a little bit of a myth and a misconception that there isn't research about primary classroom retrieval practice, and there is, and it's really positive. So yeah, you're right, Adam, I'm mega keen on retrieval practice. And now with the help of you and Ella and lots of other teachers, I really want to keep pushing it in primary.
Cool. Thank you, Kate. That's all very interesting, and I like the kind of theory. And also, I did not know that it was pronounced Karpicki.
Oh, I think I might be saying that wrong. I don't know.
I don't know. I only ever saw it read, and I thought it was just Karpik, but who knows?
Oh, it's funny at the end. But I've been trying to. I want to interview him. He's done so much. Get him on Carousel webinar.
Well, I make a suggestion. If you are going to interview him, get his name right. Yeah, we should probably find out how to pronounce that name. In the meantime, back to the actual webinar rather than just chats. Ella, I'm going to bounce over to you for a bit, because this is something we discussed a bit in the last webinar, but something I know that that you're really keen on is like evangelizing for retrieval practice in the primary classroom. Does that imply that there are places where it's not happening?
I think it really depends on what kind of where your school is on their journey in terms of curriculum, and also in terms of kind of research-based and evidence-based teaching. So I think for us, we were moving towards trying to really think about how we could ensure that children, well, first of all, we knew exactly what the knowledge was that we wanted all children to know, that we were identifying like the salient knowledge in our curriculum that we were then going to be drawing upon and ensuring kind of progressed year on year. And I think that's something that a lot of schools are in the process of doing, making sure that they've got that really like tight progressive curriculum. And as part of that, if we're going to be building on something that they learn in year 4, again in year 6, they need to be able to retrieve that knowledge and remember that knowledge. So I think it's kind of become as part of a wider package, and it really depends on where schools are in that journey of where they are on that. But retrieval can help from the very like beginning of that curriculum design and moving forwards.
So can I just ask, like, what's kind of your time scale on this been? I've been, in my classroom, I've been trying to do retrieval practice for about 5.5 years now, but it's only recently that I think that I've got it pat over the last couple of years with Carousel. Kind of what's your time frame on this? When did it first kind of appear in your head as something you wanted to do?
I think primary have been kind of later onto this than secondaries, because I think a lot of the retrieval stuff and the kind of knowledge-based element people have thought is kind of directed towards exams. And although we have SATs, obviously the primary curriculum is, we're really, as teachers, we're not necessarily specialists, we're teaching the whole curriculum and really keen on it being a holistic curriculum. So I think a lot of the things that I was reading about retrieval and about ensuring that children remembered the knowledge, I thought it was kind of geared towards exams. And it was only in the last 2 academic years where I've started to realise how much this does actually apply to primary, and more so as I've become involved in my teaching and learning role in curriculum development, that it started to be like, well, no, we're not just trying to get kids to remember these facts to be able to retrieve them in an exam situation, actually to build on this knowledge and to ensure that they develop mastery and greater knowledge of the curriculum, they need to remember and then retrieve it in future. And I think that's kind of where it's come on. So for us, it's been the last academic year that I've properly done it, particularly with bringing in Carousel, is where it's kind of clicked for a lot of our teachers. But I've been supporting schools within our Academy Trust and outside of our Academy Trust that are on the very kind of start of their journey of actually talking to their staff about memory and understanding how the short-term memory works and starting to slowly kind of introduce it. So I do think we're kind of behind often where secondary is, but therefore it's a really good opportunity to do it properly and to bring it in with kind of Carousel and with all of Kate's resources, because the research is all kind of there now and the resources are there for us.
Yeah, I hear that. And like just to bring it right back to the question, I think that for me, why memory is marvelous is like you said, that like, we're not interested in memory for exams. Yeah, it's like that is the worst motivation. I mean, I think it's a legitimate motivation to teach kids. Like, if I don't get my kids their good grades, like, I've let them down. But like, it's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. But like, when the kids know stuff and they can then use it and apply it in a kind of a more creative setting or in an unfamiliar setting or a new context, then that for me kind of is a big one in terms of why we do everything. All right, cool. Let's push on. We're going to go for question number 2. And there we go. Okay, so I'll just let everyone read that for a sec. So it's really interesting because I think if you said to a lot of people, where do you start when you want to do retrieval practice? People would be like, oh, with, you know, a lesson starter or a quiz or mini whiteboards or something online or whatever. But Kate, you've said that the first step is actually establishing the essential knowledge and skills that are contained within a curriculum. Can you just, and in a second, I'm going to ask you to explain what you mean by that and what the challenges are. But I'm also just going to warn everyone that I'm going to like share and unshare because at the moment, you can probably only see us as like this tiny little square in the corner, and you don't need to be staring at the question the whole time. So I'll kind of unshare and then pop over to Kate. Okay. All right, Kate, go for it.
Yeah, well, this is actually learning from my mistake because I was embracing retrieval practice with a quiz and thinking about using retrieval tasks. And then as time developed, I started to think about it in a more sophisticated way. And it also comes back to what Ella's just said. And when I was writing the book, Retrieval Practice Primary, Ella and I, we had conversations, and I had conversations with lots of other teachers and school leaders. And curriculum has been a really hot topic about the curriculum intent and whatever phrasing language you want to use, the essential knowledge. But then that gets disjointed from the retrieval tasks. And something else that I've seen, not with Carousel, but with online quizzes, are some questions that I've been guilty of doing in the past that are non-essential questions, that are filler questions or comedy questions or have comedy options. And that you could argue, some teachers do argue with me about this, that that's harmless. But actually, I'm really against that. And I know, Adam, you've spoken about the Rosenshine, where Rosenshine suggests an 80% success rate, because obviously 100% success rate for the whole class, your quiz is too easy, or if everyone's getting less than 50%, it could be too difficult. It's like the Goldilocks principle about getting it just right, desirable level of challenge. But if you put in filler questions and comedy questions and stupid questions, then it really skews that percentage as well. So actually, it is about honing in on the curriculum and thinking, what is it my students really need to know or be able to do, understand, recall? and then quiz them on that, test them on that, retrieval practice on that. And then that will increase their retrieval strength. The things that are non-essential, then of course we don't quiz them. Why waste time on that? But that's what's actually really good about your quizzes. We talked about this before, about the quality assurance side that I don't think any other online quiz has. And that's so, so important, with the questions, that they are linked, that they are connected to the curriculum. And I also write about knowledge organisers as well. And that's a challenge. And I argue in the book that we should use knowledge organisers in primary, different to secondary. Joe Kirby created, I don't know if Joe Kirby did, but that's where I heard about knowledge organisers first, in a secondary context. And that's completely different to year one, GCSE history and early years and so on. Though I don't think there should be knowledge organisers in early years, but that's another debate. But then what you have in your knowledge organiser is that core content. So if it's on the knowledge organiser, then you've specified the knowledge, so the students know what they'll be quizzed on, they'll know what to expect. That helps with the low stakes and how they can have a higher success rate. And all the time it's coming back to the curriculum. And one of the things that I did do when I was reading about retrieval-induced forgetting and research that actually is saying don't focus on things that students don't absolutely need to know, was I went back through my quizzes and I got rid of some questions. Or I changed the options if it was multiple choice, and I decided about the ones that I would hone in on. So once you've got your curriculum intent, your curriculum content, then you do the retrieval tasks. But it hasn't always worked that way. And
Yeah,
Ella, that's like what you've done, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's really. I'll pop over to Ella in a second. I just because you mentioned the carousel questions and that we've got and the quality assurance, I just wanted to quickly show that to everyone, because we are very aware of the fact that, you know, one of the big challenges is the fact that you're expected to be subject specialists in about a zillion different subjects, which, especially like with the way things are going and the focus on curriculum, it's a big ask. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to make resources for you that will help. So this is a carousel dashboard. Can you just nod if you can see?
Yeah.
Marvelous. Yeah. So this is a carousel dashboard. This is where your quizzes sit. But this here, my question banks, this is like, it's what I call the beating heart of carousel. It's the focus. It's the thing. It's what you know. It's the star around which everything revolves. And they're your question banks, because this is the stuff you want your students to learn. And you can see that I've got some here which are premium. And what that means is that they're available in the carousel community, which I'll show you in a second. And we've got these to cover pretty much the whole national curriculum for history, the bulk of the national curriculum for geography, and the whole of the national curriculum for science at Key Stage 2. So if I showed you the science one, what it looks like is it's a series of questions and answers. So this is Year 4 electricity, and it's arranged according to national curriculum. So you do electricity in Year 4 and in Year 6. So these are the questions that you'd expect students to be able to answer in Year 4, and these are the ones in Year 6. And I guess what it means is that you've got, you know, if Ella's teaching her class in Year 6, she's about to start electricity, she's got a really strong idea now of what they've learned in Year 4. And not just that, but it means that the Year 5 teacher can be using this as content to like constantly make sure that students don't forget it. So that the poor Year 4 teacher does an amazing job teaching electricity, smashes it out of the park, kids know about circuits and conductors and insulators, and then they forget all about it in Year 5, and then Ella's frustrated. So the idea is that all teachers could collaborate and use the same question bank, I guess, you know, vertically. You know, and there's stuff like humans and light and yada yada. And then if you go into the community, you can just filter for Key Stage. And Key Stage 2 ones, we've got, there's science, like I said, Roman Britain, climate change, land and water, biomes. We've got tons of maths ones as well. So the maths ones are set up. So they've got lots of different kind of questions and answers. So you've got place values, what's the value of 8 and was 181,043, etc. And actually it was Ella that helped me do these ones, because there was a lot of terminology that I just wasn't familiar with. Putting numbers into size order, Roman numerals. I only recently discovered that you guys have to teach Roman numerals, and without making things too political, That does not make any sense to me, but such is life. It's what you got to do. So it's what you got to do. And then I think I showed, history ones, geography, maths, science, all of that stuff. At which point I'm now going to pass back to Ella, because what I'm really interested in is to know like how you and how your schools have tackled this issue of specifying the curriculum.
I think there's two kind of main ways of looking at it. So for us, we wanted to make good knowledge banks, and we wanted to review the knowledge banks that we had. And there was too much information on them. We weren't quite happy with the design and the layout. So when we were reviewing the knowledge banks we had, then we ended up reviewing our medium-term plans and our long-term plans, and basically like pulling a thread, and it all kind of unraveled that actually it was a lot bigger a problem than we originally thought, because if we want the knowledge banks to be good, then we need to make sure the salient knowledge is good. And so then it kind of, we needed to start from the beginning and kind of review it all. So we did it in a way that we sat our subject leaders down. We're lucky that we're part of an academy, so our subject leaders from different schools could come together and share their knowledge and really look at the national curriculum, look at our context as well, and like wanting to put in cultural capital opportunities, wanting to like bring in the history, for example, of our local area, and wanting to bring in what's most appropriate for our students. So kind of from that, we kind of wrote the curriculum, and the thing that we really focused on was what is the salient knowledge, what's the key knowledge we want our children to learn, and then that was aligned with the knowledge banks. The knowledge banks were directly linked to the key knowledge, and then we made Carousel question banks directly off that key knowledge. So it all worked really nicely. It was all kind of a package together, and then I think it's such a big ask. In Ofsted, I've just gone through an Ofsted last term, and they really do ask, well, what did this child learn last year? What did they learn? We're in year one, and they were asking them what they learned in reception about certain numbers that they were now drawing upon in year one. And these are very young children. So as a teacher, you need to be able to very confidently say what came before and what came after. And this is a really good way for our staff to do that. They've got the question banks, and like you said, they can use the Carousel question banks and the Whiteboard feature, and that can be for early morning work, or it can be for a starter. I'm sure, Adam, you'll be able to show the Whiteboard feature later on, or whenever's useful.
We'll show in a second. You finish off and then we'll show it.
Yeah, so that kind of element works really well all together. But what I've done with a different school was that we actually started with the Carousel question bank. So we had Adam's science question bank with like the whole science national curriculum on it. And because the subject leaders weren't as confident, it was like, well, this is what Adam's identified as the salient knowledge, and other primary specialists that have worked with him. So this is the salient knowledge. Now let's use that to make sure that your lessons are really explicitly identifying this salient knowledge, and ensuring that the kind of teaching and learning was really clear, and the children were embedding exactly what we wanted them to. So I think it can start from your curriculum, and then you can create those question banks aligned with that, or you can draw on the question banks to then help you form your curriculum. So yeah, both ways work really well.
Brilliant, thank you. So Ella's mentioned the Whiteboard feature, which I know, Ella, I think if I remember correctly, this is your favorite feature.
It's just such a time saver. I think any primary school teacher who sat there and
don't give away, it was only yes or no, Ella, come on.
I'm not giving away too much here. Just
right,
as a primary teacher, you write 700 arithmetic questions a year, I would say, for maths, whereas with this you don't have to do it anymore. That is all I'm going to say.
I tell you what, I'll show everyone the whiteboards mode, which is basically where it's about having a quiz in a lesson. So the idea is it goes onto your whiteboards. So normal carousel quizzing is students do it themselves independently through a device, through a phone or a laptop or a tablet. They can do that at home, they can do that in class. However, that's normal carousel quizzing. Whiteboard mode is done in class as a group. So you give it your title, you might want to call it, let's just go with electricity because it's the one we're just looking at. So you start from your question bank and you say pick science, and you're gonna, let's say you want them in sequential order, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So let's say you've just finished teaching electricity. So you want, say, 3 questions from year 4 stuff, and you can choose those. So we'll go for 3 electrical appliances, name a good conductor, and name a good insulator. And now let's say we've just finished the year 6 stuff. So we'll pick another 3 from here. And we'll go for 3 types of power supply, cell and a battery, how a lamp's brightness change with, that should be changes, spotted a typo, useful knowledge. Here we go. There we go. And then that pops up on your screen, just like that on your whiteboards. And can you just nod if you can see that? Yeah. So Ella, I tell you what, why don't, I know how I do this in my class. Why don't you just kind of walk us through the steps to how you do it? And then maybe, Kate, I'll bounce back to you after that. Okay, go for it, Ella.
So it depends. So sometimes I would use this. So for example, when we started electricity, I would do it as a DNA, like a do now activity at the start of the lesson with just the stuff that they've learned in previous years.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you? When you say the start of a lesson, yeah, because in my head, the start of a lesson means students coming into my room from somewhere else, but that's not what it means for you, right?
No, yeah. So it would just be after lunch or whatever it may be, whenever we are going to start science.
But you might finish teaching some maths and say, right, we're going to do science quiz now, and you'll use this as a break.
Yeah. So it can be used in, I think that's what's quite nice about primary is that we have that flexibility. So I would do this, like get them to write their date and title, and then maybe do this in their books as at the start of the lesson. But equally, I've used it as early morning work. So if I know, sometimes I'll just do a mix of the different science stuff, for example, if we're sticking with science that they've learned that I want them to go over because I don't want them to forget it. So that could be kind of way more random than specifically electricity. Or like you say, like a break, particularly like the last 5 minutes of the day. Once they've got their stuff, this is just an easy kind of time filler that I know is actually a really effective use of the time. So we'll kind of use it in any way like that, and I'll either get them to write it in their books, they'll do it on mini whiteboards, we might do it verbally. We've got little like journals that they write some salient knowledge in at the end of each week, so sometimes we'll put a quiz on to help them with that as well. So it can really be used in any way that you have some spare time, just to do a little quiz.
Understood. And how do you, so the kids do it themselves quietly, and then how do you go over it? Because I know in my class I go question by question, one by one, and we like discuss each one as a group. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, exactly that. So it depends what we're doing. If we're using mini whiteboards, they'll do it, and I really like stress that because it's retrieval, this needs to be done silently and independently. But then I might give them the opportunity, particularly if it's something that I know that they've probably forgotten or they haven't done in a while, to discuss it in pairs before they then show their whiteboards. Other times I will cold call and ask children to explain that answer and then bounce it on to see if they've all got the same. Other times I'll just go through it and model it myself. So yeah, it really depends on the content, but just like how you'd go through any sort of quiz in class, there's the opportunity to do it with this and then reveal the answers that they can purple pen mark it usually themselves and identify any mistakes they've made and edit it themselves.
Understood. Kate, what have you got for me?
Yeah, so I was asked by a teacher who said, right, if we're doing a topic in year 6 and they've done it in year 4, should I quiz them or should I ask them, what can you remember about this topic from what you've done in the past? Just free recall. But 2 things, Jeffrey Carpi, that's what his research found, was that actually retrieval practice worked with younger students, but they needed more guided retrieval, cued recall with specific questions rather than write down everything you know about electricity from year 4. So that, and I also took this question to Robert Bjork as well, world leading expert in memory, and he said the same thing. If it's been a while since students have looked at this and the retrieval strength could be low, so instead of just write everything down from memory without any support, any cues, they could really struggle, and then that could knock their confidence. The teacher might assume they've forgotten everything, whereas actually a quiz would be more beneficial for also the retrieval element, but also for their confidence and morale, motivation, and so on. So the fact that you have got this, because I could be, obviously a year 6 teacher and I didn't teach them this topic in year 4, but the fact that I could go and get that quiz or the questions, that's really effective.
Yeah, it's interesting because both count as retrieval practice, right? Asking a student a question or
Yeah.
asking them to just remember everything counts as retrieval practice. But what I find is that students, they just blank out on me when I'm like, put down everything you remember about light, and they're like,
Yeah.
whereas if I put 6 or 7 questions on the board, it's right there.
The questions are cues and prompts, and this is the research that I kept reading, kept coming back saying younger children just need this guidance, this scaffolded approach, because they could just really struggle. What type of things does Miss want me to write about? Or just go completely blank. But if there's a question, either multiple choice or short answer question, well, they know exactly what it is that needs to be retrieved. So that's a key theme throughout my book, is about the free recall, the idea of writing everything down from memory. That can be done in primary, but when they've done lots and lots of retrieval opportunities and tasks later on, they've got to have lots of guided retrieval first.
All right, brilliant. I want to move on to the next question. Now, just as a quick heads up, it sounds like my son is climbing up the stairs, and he's definitely not supposed to be climbing up the stairs. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to put up question number 3, right? And then I'm going to ask Kate to answer question number 3. You guys don't need me to elaborate on it. And I'm going to go make sure that my son is safe, because he's only 2 and he shouldn't be climbing up the stairs. Here we go.
Okay. Ella, can you see the question?
No, but I can get it. So question.
Sorry, you can't see the question. Hang on. It's okay. One sec. There we go. Right.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you. I'll give everyone a moment, including myself, to read that. Oh, hello. Yeah, so this links in with what I've just said about how students need the guided recall. This is where we can really help them with multiple choice and the short answer. Now, the multiple choice, a benefit and advantage of that is that obviously that can lead to a high success rate, because the answer is there for the students to recognise. And if we design our questions well, then the plausible distractors can also tell us something else. So Daisy Christodoulou's written about this. There's some examples in my book. I think I give an example about the gunpowder plot. Which building were they trying to blow up? And I had the correct answer, the Houses of Parliament. And then my 2 plausible distractors are 2 key buildings in London, Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey. Now, a student, if it selects Buckingham Palace, the misconception could be, oh, well, they were trying to kill the king. This is where the royal family live. If they pick the Westminster Abbey, they may think, oh, religion was an issue. So they're trying to blow up that building. So then I can unpick and I could see where my students have gone wrong. So multiple choice questions, I'm a big fan of them, but they can be really badly designed. And that's why another reason why I'm so glad that Carousel have quality assured this, because other websites, there's loads of really badly designed questions out there where the plausible distractors are not plausible. But then the other option then, once you've had multiple choice exposure, is to challenge students a little bit more, and we remove that with the short answer questions. And they're great for mini whiteboards. You can get through quite a lot of short answer questions, multiple choice questions very quickly in a lesson. So that means you can cover more content. So yeah, lots of advantages to this. Definitely should be using this from really early on, all the way throughout primary.
Cool, thank you. It turns out it was my son climbing up the stairs. He has now been taken downstairs. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because the thing about the plausible distractors is that I've spent quite a long time trying to figure out, kind of like digging into the research on multiple choice questions. And just as a quick plug, by the way, guys, we're in the middle of a 3-part Carousel teaching and learning blog series on multiple choice questions. So the first one, which we published, I think last week, it's just got some guidance about how to write plausible distractors. The second one is about where you put them in your sequence of teaching. So my personal opinion, and I think that's echoed by what Kate just said, is that you can start right at the beginning of your teaching. Multiple choice questions are great, but you want to wean students off them so that they can do free recall, and then you can come back to them at the end for pure assessment. But that kind of middle stretch has to be done, in my opinion. I want to be clear, there's no research here, yeah? I want to be very clear that this is opinion. There's no research on how they should fall in a learning sequence. My personal opinion is that beginning, multiple choice, middle, short answer, end, you can then choose to go back to multiple choice for your assessments. So I'm going to bounce over to Ella and ask you if you make use of multiple choice questioning. And then there's been a really nice question into the chat that I'm going to pose to you guys. And I'm just going to put the current question into the chat as well, just in case anyone missed it. Okay, Ella, over to you. Multiple choice.
Yeah, I just completely agree with what you and Kate said. I use it very similarly, that we start with using the multiple choice, particularly if I'm trying to kind of cue their memory of stuff that they've learned a few years before or haven't touched in a while. Giving those multiple choice and getting them to think about that, and then perhaps discuss that in their pairs once they've had that independent retrieval, is a really good way of encouraging them to go, well, I know it's not that, because that isn't the right answer for these various reasons, and to kind of create that deeper understanding and context around it. What I really like about Carousel and the new multiple choice questions is the fact that you can use the same question bank as multiple choice, or the children writing their own answers. The fact you don't have to upload two separate question banks has been really beneficial, because I can start with that question bank and use that question bank firstly multiple choice, and then kind of, like you said, move them away. And there will be some children that perhaps I'll keep multiple choice on for a little bit longer than others as well, which is really nice to have that option.
You've got to respond to your own class.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, cool. That's really nice answers. We are it's 4:54, and I want to make sure we've got time for everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to a question that in one of our first webinars caused a bit of, I wouldn't say controversy is the right words, but there was a bit of back and forwards about this one. So Kate, you in your book and that webinar which you joined, we spoke about countdown timers, and you said you don't like them. And Carousel, when we built it, it's got no countdown function. And most apps do have a countdown function. We've deliberately decided we do not have countdown function. We might bring one in future, but we decided it wasn't going to be part of the core offering. Okay, so so Kate, over to you then. Why do you give this advice?
Yeah, so I feel quite strongly about this as a classroom teacher, and then from experts that I've spoken to. So the first one as a classroom teacher is, like others teachers probably experience, when there's a timer, I've had students go, oh, I knew that. They just rushed. They didn't read the question. They didn't read the options carefully because that timer was there, getting them into very bad habits. I also didn't like, I don't know, I'm probably not allowed to name which quiz, but there was a very famous, well-known quiz that you would get more points for the quicker that you answered. And I didn't like that again either, because it's about, I want the students to get that correct answer. So I had my own frustrations with it. Then when I've been writing about retrieval practice and retrieval practice with students with SEND, I reached out to Cheryl Kidd, Jules Storby, Rebecca Gate, lots of experts. And something that kept coming back was that students with SEND still could find the act of retrieval practice stressful. Even if we say it's a quiz, it's low stakes. So actually what we've got to do, as well as make it explicitly clear, is remove the timer. And I always give the example of the countdown timer and how I'm never very good on countdown. Well, I don't go on the show, but when I'm doing it at home, the music, the timer, the pressure, the panic. And also as well, students with SEND, students with English as an additional language, they may need longer to process and understand what the question is actually asking. There was some action research published by a group of teachers. This is really interesting. It's from 2003, and they did a project where they were looking at students on the SEND register and retrieval practice. This involved observations, interviews, looking at their data results. And again, the thing that kept coming back was from students, I don't do well on tests, I don't like tests. And these quizzes had timers. And it's also different for different subjects. Craig Barton has said diagnostic questions in maths, 10 seconds. And then I've seen some other questions within humanities where there's a lot of subject-specific vocabulary, and 10 seconds isn't appropriate. So there's also the famous research study, Pooja Agarwal, brilliant. Pooja Agarwal and her colleagues looked into retrieval practice and anxiety and found that the majority of students, 70% of students, regular retrieval practice meant that when it came to a formal assessment, that they were less stressed. It actually reduced their anxiety, boosted their confidence. Some were the same, but then there was 6% who said that regular retrieval practice, made them more stressed. And it's that 6% that it's easy to ignore and just say, oh, well, the majority of students don't find it stressful. But that's for me. I think there's so many different threads to this. I just think it's easier to just remove that question timer.
It's so interesting because I've never used them myself in my classroom, and I think for me, like the idea of saying in advance how long they've got for something that just stresses me out, because I'm like, how could I know how long this particular task will take? And so, like, and even if I went for a fixed time every time, like, what if the questions were ones that required longer answers? Like, there are some questions in the question banks that are one answer and some which are a couple of sentences. So it stresses me out regardless of what it does to the students. Ella, do you ever use a timer?
I used to. I know early in my career that was my feedback at one point from a lesson observation, that I needed to use timers. Like that classic early observation.
Improved pace, yeah, by putting a timer on the board, yeah.
But very similar. When I have my current class is 50% SEM, and so I've learned a lot from them. And I try to make retrieval practice as calm and low stakes and like very routine, and like it does not need to be this speedy, quick fire, stressful situation. It needs to be actually, you need the time to really think, and they've been taught strategies to help them if they can't remember, and I want them to apply that, and they're not going to do that if they're feeling stressed about the time.
Yeah. And we know stress has a negative impact on memory, so it's this double-edged sword.
Too much stress.
Too much, yes. Too much stress can have a negative impact on memory. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit is a good thing. If the kids don't have enough stress, then it tends to reduce performance. But I was going to say something that I thought about and then completely forgot it. Oh well, really lovely reflection from both of you there. Okay, there's been a few questions in the chat, and I promise I'm going to come back to them at the end. I just want to make sure we have time to finish off our set questions. Now this is a question for Ella to start with, because it's about the case study that you wrote for Kate's book. So I'll let everyone read that for a second. And Ella, I'm going to give you the unenviable task of doing this in 3 minutes.
All right. Okay, so I think a major part was that our staff needed to understand why we were doing retrieval practice, and it needed to fit in a bigger kind of context than just retrieval practice. So we did CPD on memory, how the working memory works, how to apply that in the classroom. We were really lucky that at one of our MAP meetings, Daniel Willingham came and did a keynote speech. So people had a good understanding of what memory was and how we apply that to a classroom. And then we did more specific CPD on retrieval, knowledge banks, salient knowledge, etc. And with that, we bought all of our schools a copy of Kate's book so that they had, they could use that, and we send out like teaching and learning bulletins, and so they could see what things there were out there and what their research was. So everyone's kind of started looking at it and started trying to kind of implement it. And then we brought it in with staff on a more action research kind of basis. So some brought in low stakes quizzes in the lessons to see the impact that had. Some had the children writing down the salient knowledge and then writing a quiz about that at the end of the week, all different ways to kind of so that the staff felt empowered, involved in not just this works, do it, but working out how actually that was going to work within their classrooms. And part of that action research was one year group brought in Carousel, and they started using Carousel for their homework. And then we had staff meetings where we fed back and basically agreed on what our policies were going to be and how that was going to look within our classroom. But the kind of key bit there was that the staff really needed to understand why and what the purpose was and how this fit in with our curriculum and for our students and why we were doing it. And then within that, I think a really important element was introducing it to the students. So we teach kind of meta memory, we have assemblies about how their memory works, why we're doing retrieval, how they can help how they can help themselves remember things better. And I think that was so crucial for getting buy-in from the students, that no matter how young they were, they had a basic understanding of their memory and the fact that their working memory was limited and why they needed to do this retrieval. And I think that was so essential for getting them really to buy into Carousel. On the residential last week, we had, like you were saying, Roman numerals. We were in a museum and there was a clock with Roman numerals, and one of the children literally, not even joking, went, yes, retrieval, look, Roman numerals. And the same, we were in a talk about birds at this park we went to, and there was this bird that lived in the Arctic, and he literally turned to me and said, I'm going to try and remember all the things about the Arctic, so then that new knowledge will stick to it. Like, they really love it. So I think that element of making sure the children understand why they're doing it has helped massively. And as part of that, we needed the parents to understand it. So we did a workshop with the parents. We used Kate's, she's made a YouTube video which explains retrieval to parents. So we shared that with them. We explained why homework was going to be retrieval. And then we just tried to kind of drop it in wherever we could through newsletters. We do a sway where we tell them what they're going to be learning in the upcoming term. In Parents' Evening, we were kind of dropping in things that they could do of memory to support. And we've had such good feedback. I think them understanding why we were doing Carousel and then understanding how that fit into our kind of wider push on retrieval has meant the buy-in's been really good. And we haven't always had parents take us up on homework as much as we would have liked them to. But with Carousel, the feedback's been like, I don't need to know how to do it because the flashcards are there and the knowledge is there. There's not such stressful kind of homework that's, I know as a teacher in the past, I've just grabbed random homework sheets I found offline because I've forgotten to set it on a Thursday. Whereas this is actually like the parents can see how it links to their learning. It's systematic. And they really do prefer it because it's a lot less stress and onus on them. Yeah, that I went really quick. Was that 3 minutes?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. The second I said to you, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, I regretted it because we just spent ages talking about timers and not using them. You handled that with aplomb. And what I've done is I've just summarized what you said in like bullet point form, and I popped that into the chat because you covered a lot of ground, and I think it's important for everyone to be able to see all the different points, and they can take that away with them as well. And
they can read it in Kate's book as well.
Yeah, and exactly. The whole case study is in Kate's book, which is available from all good booksellers, including Amazon, and you should definitely buy. And what I want to do there is, because you mentioned homework, I actually want to take us over then to the final question. So what we'll do is we'll spend 5 minutes over this final question, and then we'll take the questions from the chat. Okay, Kate, can you see the question that's up on the boards? Okay, super. So I'll let everyone have a read of that. Okay, Kate, over to you. You're muted.
Classic, you're on mute. I think, as you've said, this is often a missed opportunity. And I shared the video for parents and carers in the chats that's on YouTube, and it links in with what Ella said about talking to parents, because I've had some conversations with parents about homework where they've said that they're just tasks, and some parents have been very honest with me and said they've done the homework for their student, for their child, just that does happen. But actually, if they understand the benefits of retrieval practice, then they're robbing them of that opportunity to improve their memory. And also as well, if parents and carers understand, you know, that forgetting happens, and if a child can't remember something, and that's why the flashcards are helpful. And I do want to say, actually, because up until a few years ago, I probably did believe that retrieval was more secondary based. And then the work of John Hutchinson has been incredible. And he shared a video on YouTube years ago about how he used a knowledge organizer with his year 4 class and then used flashcards for spaced retrieval practice. And that was with year 4. And that was just a real game changer for me, that he'd been using this. But again, the video he made was for parents, because if we really are to get retrieval practice as part of the whole school community, like Ella said, we've got to have leaders at all levels, classroom teachers, teaching assistants, students, and then at home. And we can really utilize it. Instead of retrieval practice just being 5 minutes at the start, there are so many other opportunities that can be used effectively for retrieval practice. Adam, you're good at writing about this, and you've been a big advocate for it with homework as well. And you've used Carousel for that, haven't you?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, we've tried really hard to think deeply about. And just quickly as an aside, John Hutchinson, by the way, who's amazing, has been part of the quality assurance group, and he's been involved quite heavily in Carousel Primary. So his hand is present in a lot of our question banks. And yeah, homework is difficult to get right. I wrote about this recently, and I'm just going to pop a link to the blog that I did recently that might help. It's what I call the 4 planks of an effective homework policy, because it's so easy to get wrong. And I think that thing that you said about parents being involved is so crucial. You know, at secondary, it's almost like the thing I want from parents is just to check the kid is doing it. Whereas at primary, the parent almost has to be much more involved. Like, I'm getting this a lot with my daughter. You know, she's just finishing off reception, and like when we're reading with her, like, she can't do that by herself. Yeah, you know, we need to be there. We need to be working with her. But then we come up against something, and I'm not sure what the right way to explain it is, or I don't know what knowledge she's got, what knowledge she doesn't have. I don't want to go trampling on anyone's toes or doing anything wrong. So the fact that, you know, parents have access to the flashcards and stuff like that, I think makes a massive difference. Ella, let me quickly bounce over to you, and then we'll go to questions from the floor.
Yeah, I agree. I think the flashcards have made a massive difference. Like, my parents have told me how much they've been learning, particularly when it came to like GPAS and the different like terminology that they hadn't come across before. My parents will log in themselves first, have a quick look through the flashcards, pretend they know it for when their child asks them. So they've been really enjoying it in that kind of way as well. But I think particularly in upper key stage 2, the children can do it independently. They don't necessarily need an adult there with them, because especially if it's multiple choice, they read the question, they choose one of the options, and then they self-mark against the model answer, or if it's multiple choice, kind of is marked for them. So that kind of adds a real kind of, the children like it because it's independent, it's quick, they can do it themselves, and they also see that it's relevant, because, well, if they did their homework, then they're going to do better in the quiz that we do in class and the low stakes quiz, and they can see how it all links together really nicely. And by having the sways and the newsletters, the parents can see, oh, well, they were doing this for their retrieval homework, and now I can see that it fits in really well with what they've done this week. So I think that kind of wider package works really nicely. But some of the new features that are coming with Carousel, like the text, reading the text out, etc., will be really good for the younger students being able to do that a bit more independently as well.
Great, thank you, Ella. So what I'm going to do really quickly now is I'm just going to just add to what Ella said. So we've got more features that are coming up really soon that will be definitely of interest. So things like, we've got text to speech, so that the question will be read out to the student. And we've also got image support coming through as well. So you'll be able, so when you do, you know, your local area and stuff like that, you'll be able to put pictures in, really useful for geography, really useful for science, and I guess for history as well, can be really powerful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the final slide, which will show you if you want to know more about Carousel. And of course, you can just be in touch with me or the team directly. It's not a problem. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly blitz through some of these questions. But I'm going to invite people if they want, because I do want to finish at 5:15 because it's getting late and people are busy, and some of us are still tired from residentials, Ella. And so, but I will hang around. So if anyone has any more questions, then obviously please stay. So first off, so all of that information is now up on the board there for you, and I'm just going to get the chat up so I can answer these questions. So we had a really, really interesting pedagogical question from Matthias, who hopefully I pronounced that correctly, who's asked about gamification. He sent me as a direct message, so you can't see this one. And he recently saw a video from Teach Like a Champion where a preschool teacher did retrieval through songs, which was really great. And I think that every teacher has to kind of use strategies that work and engage their class. Gamification can be super powerful. It can also massively not work. And part of the reason for that is because it's about the way the reward system works, right? If the reward for a particular, for getting something right is a star or a point or a new haircut or something like that, then very quickly that becomes tied to the activity, and the student does the activity because they get the reward. Whereas what we want is, over the long term, is for students to do it because they know it's important and because they get a thrill from learning. So it might be that you need it like initially just to bring the students in, but it's one of those things that always should be tried to pull back on where you can. And actually, something that's interesting, my school, we don't do extrinsic motivation. We don't do if-then rewards. So we don't have positive points or anything like that. They don't exist. We do things called now that rewards, which are surprise. So if a student has done really well, they might get a surprise reward, but it's never an expectation, and they know that the reason why we learn and the reason why we do well in class is because it's its own reward. But obviously that takes a long time, and it's about culture. But to be fair, the flip side, of course, is that if you only have one class or 1.5 classes or whatever, it's with you to build that culture. So there's an opportunity there as well. There's a question about the element of guesswork in multiple choice quizzes. This is a brilliant question. You can never really eliminate guesswork because students can always just guess, but you should be able to tell from scores. So if scores are low, you can tell there's been quite a lot of guessing going on. And what I like to do can I quickly show you this? I won't be able to quickly share it to you, but basically when I analyze multiple choice scores, this is why you need to look out for the blogs, yeah? Get the teaching and learning blogs from Carousel. When I look at multiple choice scores, if I see that there's, say, option A, B, C, and D, if I see there's like an even spread, I know a lot of students have been guessing. If I see a big spike at the right answer, I know that kids know it. If I see an even spread, they don't know it and there's been guessing. If I see 2 spikes, then I know that there's a particular misconception that's caught them out. And so basically the way you look at it is by looking at what the students are writing, look at their scores overall, things like that as well. It can be good ways to give an indication. And research indicates that the best score to aim for in multiple choice is a bit more than half of the difference between 0 knowledge and full knowledge. What I mean by that is as follows. Let me explain. If you've got 4 choices, right, in your multiple choice, if students don't know the answers, they'll fall out 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. A student will get, in the quiz in total, they'll get 25% if they don't know at all. If they know them all, they'll get 100%. And the trick is to go for roughly a bit more than half of that. So half of that in 4 choices would be about 66%. So I aim for 75%. If you're aiming if students are getting 75% and above, you know they're not guessing a lot. If they're getting less than that, there's been quite a lot of guessing going on as well. There's a really, really nice comment here from Rachel Rossiter about who's an SEND expert and actually someone that I defer to quite a lot on questions of SEN, and I ask her a lot of questions. And she said that during lockdown, Cassie and her did some research into what was working with home learning. Cassie is a Senko in primary schools, I believe, into what was working in home learning. And they noticed that the fact that students had a pause button when they were watching a video back was amazingly powerful for SEND students. And it's interesting to think about how you could replicate that in a class, just to pause and give silence and just to let students have that time to think and to process. And again, Matthias pointing out that maybe timers could be better with older students. Yet they could be. And Kate's put her YouTube presentation. Let me have a quick look. Carousel looks so someone's put a direct message, which is Carousel looks amazing and I particularly love the fact it's accessible to all. Is it costly? Not in our opinion. If you get a whole school account, it's basically scaled for the more teachers you get. And what you can do is, if you go to the website, so what I've got here, carousellearning.com/product/primary, there's a quote generator where you put in your school, you put in how many teachers you'd be getting it for, and we'll get you a quote right off the back of that, or you can email us direct, no problem. And there's some other links which are useful and some other interesting comments that I'll let you guys read at your own leisure. At which point it is now 5:17. And I'm going to say a massive, massive thank you to Kate and Ella for joining us tonight. And I'm going to invite you to just put your thanks into the chat bar to them, because I think they've done a really amazing job. It's been really interesting. For me, this is all like a revelation as I learn more about primary schools. I'm learning more and more about good practice. And the two of them have just been so helpful to us. So I'm really grateful as well. I'm going to hang around. Kate and Ella, if you want to hang around as well, that it's obviously completely up to you. And if anyone wants to hang around to ask another question, be it pedagogical, be it technical, please do feel free, because we are here to answer.
Thank you, Adam.
My pleasure.
In my book, and both of you. So I think really exciting time for retrieval practice in primary schools.
Fingers crossed. We've had some amazing take up in primaries, so hopefully we can help make a difference. Cool. Let's see if anyone's hanging around to ask any questions. Some people, they like to hang around in case somebody else asks a question. So like, oh, that might be interesting. I can see Rachel there. Hi Rachel, how are you? Oh, hang on. Rachel, wait. I've got a question in. Okay. Question from direct message. Right. What age do the words banks and curriculum start from, please? I assume, does that mean what age do you start introducing those to children? I think. Ella, I'll pass to you for that.
So we do it from year 1, and yeah, so from year 1 we've got knowledge banks. I mean, there are a lot more. All our kind of key vocabulary is dual coded anyway, so there's a lot more reliance on like the picture element of it when we're in year 1. But we start using that terminology from year 1, and from next year we'll be using Carousel from year 1 as well.
Wow, from year 1.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's time to get your thoughts on it, Adam.
Gosh, okay, cool. Oh well, Matthias has been really helpful because he's translated Pooja's article into Spanish. Bueno, gracias.
Yes.
My Spanish isn't great. I'm sorry.
I met a year 1 student who was able to explain retrieval practice to me in his own words. I was just blown away by that, because that's amazing. The understanding that he had of the limitations of working memory and how he can improve his memory. Just like, wow, you should go on to be a fantastic learner. And I know Adam Woodward's here, and he does retrieval practice really well and use knowledge organisers from year 1 in a way that is very clear and age appropriate. And that's it, isn't it? It's about the application of it in this context.
Amazing. Right, Rachel, you've got a question. So I've just asked you to unmute, so you can just go for it.
Hello. I saw on Twitter last week a young teacher had been kind of given feedback on observations that her retrieval practice was too long. And what worries me about retrieval practice is that we may see lethal mutations in that retrieval practice becomes kind of a distinct entity, which is almost like a lesson starter. And that will lead to kind of retrieval practice as part of responsive teaching throughout the lesson. As your lessons flow sometimes, for example, if you were sharing a text, I did today, and there was some personification. So there's an ad hoc opportunity to kind of say, right, what's this an example of? And that's retrieval practice, isn't it? But because it's not a starter or a quiz, that there may be a reluctance to kind of, and we'll lose all of that responsive teaching where a lesson flows naturally into retrieval practice. And I'm a bit worried about kind of it being bastardized into some kind of separate entity, and that we're back to the old starter main plenary, and that's just a concern that I have.
Yeah, I think that is a super duper question, and I have similar concern, and a lot of the time people say to me, the most common question I get about do nows is people say to me, it's taking too long. Yeah, why is it taking so long? And it's always because the students don't know anything, right? You teach them something in September, you never revisit it again, and then in January you give them a starter based on it, and they spend forever over it because they don't know anything, and then you do your reteach or whatever, and it takes forever, and you end up flustered and go, right, does everyone get that now? And you're trying to explain stuff verbally when ordinarily you'd be using a slide or your board or whatever. And I think that I complete. So, but the flip side, of course, is that if you don't have regular fixed point retrieval, a lot of it falls at the wayside. So the reason why we have like a randomizer, for example, in Carousel is because it means that you've built in the spread over time. Because if you rely on retrieval being part of your natural organic lessons, well, what if there's something that never comes up again? So you teach something in September and it's not relevant to anything else that comes up, and you end up not revisiting that. So on the one hand, you need to do your fixed point retrieval. On the other hand, you need to be responsive in class as well. And I think it falls on, to be honest, Rachel, I think it falls on people like us. Yeah, people who, if someone asks us a question and says, what do you think about retrieval? Or someone asks me or Kate or Ella or you to do some training on retrieval practice, or, anyone in this audience who's, delivering training for their school, it's absolutely crucial to make that point that yes, retrieval practice has to happen at fixed points, because otherwise you'll end up forgetting things and you won't do it. And there'll be things that fall to the wayside, but it also has to be an organic, integrated part of your practice. It's a very tricky one to get right.
Yeah, and Kate spoke, didn't she, at the beginning about Rosenshine's, I think it's Rosenshine's 0.6, isn't it? About 80% take up. Well, you don't know how long that's going to take. And I worry that lots of children are going to be over-identified as SEN if we have this real fixation on curriculum. I've got a new term that I'm coining myself, plowage, curriculum plowage without retrieval practice beyond your planned is kind of going to lead to not 80% actually success rate.
And this is, you're absolutely right to raise this, because this is happening. I go to schools and they say, yeah, we do retrieval. We do 5 to 8 minutes at the start of every lesson, and that's that. And then they'll just do multiple choice, and they'll have their 5 or 10 multiple choice questions at the start of every lesson. And that's great, that it's better than no retrieval, but then all of these missed opportunities, like Adam said, about homework, and like you said, about responsive teaching in the lesson. It lends itself well to doing as a tick box, as a bolt on, but we've got to move away from that. And I think, it is a great way to start a lesson. It is a great way to establish a routine. And Rosenshine said daily review and regular review. So I think that's why it has been mutated that way. So it does, like Adam said, people have got to keep spreading the message. Leaders at all levels have got to be really clear with that, because it's some of the head teachers and senior leaders that I've met who said, we insist on this. Actually, what if in primary they're coming in and they need to finish off something from just before break? Well,
saying we insist on this is often a bad start for anything, isn't it?
It happens so often, and then they feel like, well, that's done now. We can say we do retrieval practice because we say it should be at this point, but then it's not really to truly and fully understand why we're doing retrieval practice. So yeah, you're right, Rachel. It's happening.
Agreed. We've got one question in here from Sarah about knowledge organisers. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to forbid anyone from answering the question, because Kate has a brilliant section about knowledge organisers in her book. So Sarah, all I can say to you is we're not going to talk about it now. I'm sorry, you just have to go online and get that book.
There is a chapter, case study from Adam, a chapter all about knowledge organisers in primary. And
not me, Adam Woodward.
Oh, sorry, the other Adam Woodward, yes.
Fantastic. All right, cool. It is 5:26 and Sarah's already got on order. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this to a close. I've had a lovely time, but I imagine my son is a bit annoyed that he hasn't had more time to spend with me. So I'm going to bid you all a good evening. Thank you again. And please, please, please just do be in touch if you have any questions or you'd like to check out Carousel. Have a good one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Oh, there's a dog that really enjoyed the session as well. Dog will do retrieval as well. Okay, and with that, I'll get my coat.
Thank you. Bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So much.